Hi everyone, good morning, welcome back to the Three Seas House. My name is Henry Foy, I'm the Brussels Bureau Chief for the Financial Times. It's a real pleasure
to be back here again. We're going to talk about space this morning, and to kick us off we have a message from a very important person, an astronaut indeed, someone who knows far more about space than I, Slawosz Uznanski. So without further ado, let's listen to Slawosz.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Three Seas Hub in Davos, organized by the Polish Development Bank together with Atlantic Council. Unfortunately, I am not able to join the panel discussion this year as I am currently in the United States, attending a launch of Axiom mission towards the International Space Station, on board which there is my colleague, my Swedish colleague from the ESA astronaut selection of 2022. This also shows how dynamically the global space sector is evolving, and I am proud to be able to watch one of my fellow astronauts launching just over 1 year after his selection. The title of today's discussion is Beyond Borders, the Space Industry and Technology of the Future. With my education and my professional experience spanning over 4 countries in Europe, I truly believe that science transcends borders and that international collaborations provide a common goal to look into the future together. Beyond doubt, space is one of the fastest growing branches of the industry towards which future economies are evolving. All space sessions as one of key priorities of the World Economic Forum are the best testimony for that. I would like to warmly welcome all panelists of today's session. We are honored to have with us the Director General of the European Space Agency, Dr. Josef Aschbacher. His presence shows the importance of Central and Eastern European economies in shaping the future of the European space sector. Within the past 15 years, multiple countries of the Central and Eastern Europe joined the European Space Agency. Together with ESA, these economies and these countries have big aspirations in developing technologies of the future. Poland joined ESA in 2011, and more or less at the same time, the Polish private space sector started its activity. After over 10 years of development, we can mention a couple of amazing success stories, which examples we can see in today's panel. ESA has very ambitious programs for the next decade to come. To mention some, human and robotic exploration missions, as well as contributing with space technology towards the future of European society. I am confident that common science projects will unite Europe and will inspire talented young people to pursue their careers in technology and science. I wish you all great discussions resulting in future projects, as well as an amazing time in this beautiful place in the Swiss Alps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. An excellent introduction. I'm going to introduce all the panelists and then we'll begin the discussion. As already introduced,
I've been upstaged by an astronaut already. Josef Aschbacher is the Director General of the ESA. Thank you so much for being here, sir. Next to him is Rafał Modrzewski. He's the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of ICI, right? Not ICE, right, ICI. Adam Jawinski is the co-founder and managing partner of OTB Ventures. Thank you so much. Mr. Daniel Tenney is Vice President for Strategy and Business Development at Lockheed Martin. Thank you so much. And last but by no means least, Grzegorz Zwoliński, co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of SatRev, and also a member of the Program Committee of the Polish Space Agency. This is a really interesting panel. It's something that I'm very keen to learn about. Josef, I wonder if you could start. Just could you put the sort of the industry in the Three Seas region in the global context? Where are we? Where were we before? And where do we want to get to?
No, thank you, and very nice. Good morning also from my side. Very happy to be here in this 3Cs meeting, which is really quite an important meeting. But let me just pick up on what Slawosz, the astronaut, project astronaut of ESA, was saying a minute ago. As you know, his friend and colleague Markus Wandt is launched today to the space station on a flight on SpaceX with Axiom, where we have made an agreement on one side with Sweden, on the other side with Axiom, to be able to fly what we call reserve astronauts, and Markus Wandt is one of these reserve astronauts from Sweden, and also Slawosz, whom you have just seen here on screen, is another project astronaut of ESA, will be next in line to fly to the space station. So this is a very important moment. Space is so important for many disciplines of the economy. And let me just start with a quote which is not mine, but I would like to give all the credit to the one who said it, because that somehow symbolizes how space is to be seen in many levels of the economy and of society. Last year, actually here in Davos, I was invited to a dinner panel in the evening organized by, and I can say it because he allowed me to mention his name, by McKinsey. And McKinsey has organized several dinner debates on energy, on pharmaceuticals, on transport and other domains of the economy. And one of them was on space, and he invited me, or I was invited to speak at the dinner panel about space economy, and why space is a future domain for many economic developments. And so I spoke there, and the CEO of McKinsey comes, Bob Sternfels, and I asked him, look, I said, I'm very happy that you organize a panel on space, but why on space? Can you tell me why you choose space as one of the domains? And he said, well, Joseph, I've done my homework. I have analyzed within our company, and we see thousands of companies, and we advise them on their future development. We have analyzed them, and I think, or not I think, I have proof and I've analyzed, and I know that space is a future growth domain for many sectors. Not the space sector, but many sectors of the economy. Pharmaceuticals, medical, transport, energy, and so on. And he said, what I'm doing is, when I go to meet CEOs of big companies, in China, in Shanghai, in Africa, in Europe, in the US, or in other countries, I provoke them and I say, look, are you using space in your pharmaceutical company or in your tourism company? And usually people say, space, what shall I do with space? I mean, I'm working in pharmaceuticals, there's nothing to do with space. And he said, look, I have done my work, and you could do this and that. And then he sits down with these people, and they realize, oh yes, if I'm not using space, I'm not fit for the future. I'm not innovative enough, and I cannot compete with other companies in 5 years or 10 years from now. And he said, I have a lot of evidence that many segments are completely underutilizing space today in their domains. And I think this also applies to the 3Cs countries. The 3Cs countries, and here I have to say, I'd like to thank Poland for having been waking up to the reality of this potential, and have massively invested now in space, thanks also to Slawosz, who is a good ambassador for space in the 3Cs countries, not only in Poland, obviously in Poland, but I think his reach is much wider. But Poland has recognized importance, and I really appreciate the investments they have made through major contributions to ESA, but also in other domains. And I think this is something I would like to leave as an introductory message to the 3Cs debate, that space is a domain of the future. It's a growing domain. The economic prospects are very good. We are going from 460 billion US dollars of the size of the space economy today to 1 trillion in the next decade. There's a lot of potential, and we should use it widely in the 3Cs countries, in the 3Cs context, and that's a future domain where I think these countries can particularly invest and find opportunities.
Thank you so much. Rafael, you've founded and launched one of the most successful and if I may say so in a professional sense, coolest space companies in the 3Cs region. Could you talk a bit about that personal experience of yours? I mean, as somebody who was doing this before, perhaps it became so mainstream. I mean, the opportunities that you saw, the challenges that were along the road. I mean, could you talk a bit about that so people can understand sort of what it's like to launch one of these companies in the region?
Of course. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much for coming to this panel so early in the morning. And yes, you may say so, it is the coolest company. So, look, I think we can take the story back 12 years, 2022, 2023, 4 years right now, and then we started ISA basically around 2010, 2012. Back then, the whole idea of commercial space was quite new, especially the whole idea of what we call today new space, which is space being sort of engaged with smaller players that have not done this, players that don't have so much governmental backing. And I remember, back in those days, the whole industry really emerged out of a set of university students that decided that things can be done differently. That decided that things can be done in a smaller way, in a way which is faster and less expensive. And it's going to not be as much better as it's going to be different, and it's going to be, it will augment whatever we have in existence today. And those students, myself among them, my co-founder Becca, decided that we will venture into the unknown a little bit and try to convince others that indeed you can space not only is exploration of Mars or exploration of moons of Jupiter, but also is something that we can use in our everyday decision making, in our everyday lives. And there is a way to create businesses that are financeable around this particular domain of industry. I think the early days were very difficult. A decade ago, I'm very glad to be part of this discussion. I'm very glad that there are so many space-related discussions here at Davos, because it shows how large of a leap we have made over the last decade. But I can tell you, people have been asking me back then, why on earth would you try to set up a startup around space? It's impossible. Nobody is going to finance it. It's so capital intensive. It's only possible for large established enterprises that have whole governments behind them, like Airbus or Boeing, and you shouldn't really even try. And I think I'm really glad that we kept on going and we've persevered. And I actually am happy to be speaking on this panel with Adam. Adam is one of our early backers, and so is Isa. And I think back in those days we have managed ultimately to collect a relatively small group of early believers, and those early believers have propelled many of us, myself and Grzegorz included, forward and allowed us to go through those difficult times. So, how was it 10 years ago? 10 years ago, nobody believed that space is really going to be an industry that we should care about. I think that, I would like to say that today this has fully changed. I think it's changed a little bit, but there is still quite a path ahead of us.
Thank you so much. It's interesting he said.
When you started, people said, why on earth would you do that? It sounds crazy. Plus, nobody would finance you. Somebody did finance you. It's like, why were you so crazy to finance him? I mean, I guess it's chicken and egg, right? At the start of the industry, financing also is nervous about it, also is wondering about what the growth. How has that changed in the last 10 years?
So again, thanks for having me today. And
just to answer your question, so yes, we had a pleasure and an honor to get to know Rafał something like probably 7 years ago now. So it was 2016, no 17 or whatever, quite some time ago. So anyways, we met Rafał, and if I say what would be the main reason was his belief and his enthusiasm. So he was so passionate about it. He was so convinced that he's going to make it. That it helped us to make this decision. And yes, it wasn't easy at that time. For us, it was one of the largest investments on the beginning of the fund in space tech. But we felt that if there is anyone who's going to make it, it's going to be actually Rafał, and we were not wrong. But this is, I would say, that's the way you invest in VC. You need to find people who are going to deliver against all odds, because there's nothing like a smooth ride of a startup. There's nothing like a startup that's just going like that. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it just doesn't happen. So you need to back those who are visionaries, but also capable of delivering and executing. But to answer your question, the environment has changed substantially over the last 6 years. So 6 years ago, investing in space was a bit odd, kind of, a bit crazy today. Money is flowing like really from different sources, from private investors, from corporate investors. The industry is growing, the industry is growing probably 9 to 10% year on year, and it's already sizable. If you look at some of the statistics, it's probably already like a $500 billion. So it is a sizable sizable industry. Though for many, they simply don't see that, because either they watch, the launch of a rocket and in TV, and wow, that's cool. But then many of those assets are either, in space, or hidden somewhere in the ground, but not really in the center of the city. So, and then if you use those technologies, very often you don't really recognize you're using them. And of course, GPS or satellite communication would be something obvious these days. But referring to what Dr. Josef said, actually many industries start to use that. Unfortunately, not all of the CEOs, not all of the corporates are treating this seriously, but more and more are. Pharmaceutical industry. This is going to be big. This is growing dynamically in space manufacturing. And of course, at the beginning it sounds a bit crazy, but it's actually happening already.
I'm quite keen to talk about this idea that making things in space. But Daniel, I'm very interested in hearing. I mean, obviously Lockheed, US company. When people think of space, they think of NASA. They think of the US as sort of a moot at the top of the market. I mean, when a company like Lockheed looks at the 3Cs region, thinks about space, I mean, where do you see it in the sort of global picture?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll just say, Joseph and I share a lot of backgrounds. I spent 27 years of my life in NASA, and so I have a deep love in having worked on the civilian agency and now with industry, seeing how space is changing our lives. And I think there's a few elements that are really important, and Adam touched on a couple of them. Space actually helps us in our daily lives on Earth. It's not just about understanding the origins of the universe or understanding where we can explore different planets to see if we can habitate them one day, but it actually improves our daily lives. And so, for example, the Global Positioning System, there are 4 billion users worldwide that depend on the Global Positioning System for things like navigation, timing of financial transactions, and related. The economic impact of the Global Positioning System is over $300 billion a year. It's improving how we do things. And so when you think about it, I tend to think of space in kind of 3 realms. One is how we connect. So we connect people, through the internet, for example. We use commercial civil internet. We also have mil-satcom systems that protect our warfighters in times of conflict. They're protected, to make sure that they stay connected to systems and applications. We also protect people. And so if you think about weather systems today, well, the GOES and other satellites that are actually operating in space give us early warning of weather. They tell us of disastrous events, things like wildfires that we're working on, or even just massive storms that will come that will impact us. If you just look back 100 years ago, we didn't have any of that, right? So we help protect citizens through space, and we also provide, military constructs, early warning, early missile warning systems, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance systems, things of that nature. And then we explore much more on the civil side to understand the realms of the universe and things like that. When we think about these regions in particular, we've seen the conflict in Ukraine. We understand the tragic event that's occurring there. But if you look at how space is being utilized, it's totally changed how we think about protecting citizens. And really, that's fundamentally what it's about when you think about the military defense sector, is how you protect citizens worldwide. The reality is we can have adversarial actors out there that we need to protect. And we can have adversarial events like nature, climate change, and those sorts of things. And so space is an economic engine, but it's also a capability that's helping us to live better lives, improve our lives here on Earth, and to protect our citizens. That's what it's fundamentally about. If you just kind of track humans, you can think of, we've been traveling on the ground for a long time, and then we went through the air sector, and now we're even higher, right? And we're up higher in the realm of living and sustaining life with the International Space Station and other aspects. And so really space is about life here on Earth. And I think that's what's so important. It's important to this region. And I think, Adam, it's why we're seeing more companies there, and we're seeing the government step up, as Joseph touched on, of understand the importance of improving our life, and also understand the technological advancements that come from countries that invest in space.
Thank you so much.
Grzegorz, I'm going to ask you, everyone's been very positive so far. Could you talk to the challenges that are still there? I mean, obviously, the industry here
in the region isn't as developed as it might be compared to some of the bigger global rivals. I mean, could you talk about some of those hurdles still?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me. And on the beginning, I want to say that we are in the future. In Poland, Poland did a really big step forward. We pledged, I don't know, 460 million euro in the next 3 years for space as a country. So this is great, great move forward. Last year, there were some rumors, we were preparing for this, and it happened, but nothing are happening without the people. And I know here on there's one lady, Ms. Beata Taszyńska. She's behind of all this success in Polish space ecosystem, and she was the early believer. I was working with her like, I don't know, 4 years or 5. And she was always trying to encourage space ecosystem in Poland. And right now, here we are in the future. We have a chief of ESA here with us, and we are looking forward to develop Polish space sector. So right now, we have different problems than we have before, because right now we have to mobilize as a country, as a companies, and actually start to think about big things, and start to imagine how our Polish space sector, how our Polish space ecosystem should look like. And I totally believe that the Polish businessmen and Polish engineers will do great things. Right now, a lot of projects are starting. I hope soon Slawosz will fly also to the International Space Station, and he will inspire also more Polish entrepreneurs to start their business. I totally believe that because of it, we will have more capital in Polish ecosystem, and in the 3C region, coming from the also private sector. So I think the biggest challenge right now is to grow up to like use all those funds in the proper way. This is the biggest challenge, is what we will have right now in Poland and bigger in the region.
Thank you. Dr. Aschbacher,
I'm hearing a lot about the importance of public policy and then private investment sort of being aligned in space. It seems kind of crucial. Are all countries in the region doing this, or is Poland sort of the shooting star that everyone else is trying to catch up with?
Not all countries of the 3Cs are doing the same. Actually, some of them are members of ESA, not all of them are. So this is certainly something that I look forward. Many of them are in an associate status to become future members. But certainly, among those countries, there are very few who are quite active and proactive in investing in space. And certainly what Poland decided last year with these major industrial investments, or the push giving to industrial investments through the ESA funding which was contributed, I think is a very important signal, and I really hope that this signal is not only heard but replicated in other countries of the 3Cs and do similar things, because Poland really wants more compliments to the future orientation of this decision, because this is not something that maybe is paying off tomorrow. This is investment into the future, and this is one of the challenges or warnings I really would like to mention here as well, that this is not a one-off thing. This has to be a long-term strategy, something that builds up interest in industries and builds up an economic ecosystem, because otherwise it will be money that is like in a bubble disappearing. And this is something that, of course, in space you have to think in time frames of 5 to 10 years at least, to really have a long-term strategy to do that. I know Poland has that, but if I can ask to the other 3 Cs countries, some of them are having well-established long-term strategies. Austria is one of them, who is a member in ESA since a longer period, but some of the more newer countries from the former Eastern Bloc or the eastern parts of Europe, I think they are looking really at this experience now of Poland and see how they can establish a long-term strategy and a long-term investment plan. And I really see this happening. Our job as ESA is to help these countries building up the economies, helping build up a strong space economy. It will happen, but it needs the countries to have a sustained long-term commitment in terms of a strategy and, of course, future investments to come. And this, I think, is necessary, and this is one of the elements I really would like to leave here as well.
Just as a follow-up, but I'm also keen for the other panelists to jump in on here. What, in your opinion, caused the Polish decision to go all in on space?
On one side, certainly the membership of ESA, as we have just heard before. Poland actually last year celebrated its 10 years, although it was more than 10 years, but the 10 years could not be celebrated during COVID. So we had a big celebration and a big public awareness campaign of what space means for the economy and for society. Certainly also the selection of Slawosz as a reserve astronaut, as a future astronaut candidate, has been a milestone, because that of course draws attention to the topic of space, and everything linked together with, I would say, good estimate of the future potential in the economy and what it means for society, economy, including security, by the way, Poland being next to Ukraine. I think all these elements put together have made it realize, and of course we should ask the Polish government, the representatives who will know much better, but what I got from interactions is that this was really elements that led to a recognition of space as a future investment, as I just mentioned before, and something where Poland would like to establish its footprint, being a leader in the 3 Cs regions or in the Eastern European countries, and be really a model, a role model also for other countries to follow. And I think this is something that I highly acknowledge and appreciate. And Poland and all the other countries of the 3 Cs have my full commitment to build up space in their countries. And I think what we are seeing here with Poland is quite exemplary.
Do you guys agree with that? A mix of security, economic development, and then wanting to have something pretty cool to sort of celebrate?
Yeah, so I think that is true. But what Grzegorz pointed out is very important. At the end of the day, it all starts and ends with people. I think the society at large should be educated, must be educated, and only once it's educated, you actually can start moving the bigger rocks. But you've got to have those leaders. You've got to have people that believe. You've got to have people that will try to persevere against all odds. And they are going to be the ones that are ultimately going to push this. And if you are in a situation lacking enough for yourself and for the nation, where there are several of those people, people like Slawosz, people like other people in the government, and they can come together, then I think great things can happen. And the truth is that the Polish situation, I think the change in financing is an order of magnitude, right? So that the jump is actually quite substantial. And hopefully with this jump, we will be as proud of a member of ESA as Austria, and produce as great space minds as Austria. And maybe one day one of them will become a DG of ESA.
I think we are actually seeing a kind of a bit of awakening of Europe when it comes to space tech. So
definitely, to be honest, Europe is a bit lagging behind.
Lagging behind the US.
US, and we also see China spending billions, like God knows how many billions, but a lot. And of course, they spend this on the governmental projects. It's not private, or even if it's called private, it's not private. And we don't really know how much they spend, but they spend a lot. And for this, like I should give a credit to European Commission. They opened up also a billion project, like I think 2 years ago, saying, okay, we need to start catching up. We need to innovate. We need to push for private investment. We need to push for startups. And we see this change. So again, back, I would say 6 years ago, we would really get probably maybe 1 or 2 investment decks from the startups. And most of them would be, I would say, more of a dream with lack of financial structure and visibility of revenues. Today we are getting several a week. So it has changed a lot. Many governments, starting from France, but also Italy, to some extent UK, Germany, are pushing the agenda forward with the space tech investments. France is ahead of, I would say, of everyone, at least from what we see in putting money into stimulating the startups ecosystem. But I would say that we still need to do much, much more. And I wish that ESA would have a similar budget to NASA. And it shouldn't, and this should be the case. No, seriously speaking, why whole Europe wouldn't be able to have a similar budget to the US, especially that we need to catch up. So I hope that other countries will follow, not only within the 3Cs hub, but throughout, I would say, Europe. Because, if we won't do that, we'll just lag behind. And we still have a bit time. We are a bit late, but we are still at the beginning of this huge, I would say, industrial revolution in space. And I really mean it's going to happen. And today, when we are talking about in-space manufacturing, in-space infrastructure, it sounds like a sci-fi movie, but it's going to come, it's going to happen. And either we're going to play a part in it, or we're going to lose it. And I would hate to think of Europe losing it right now. So yeah, we need to move forward, and I wish Poland is going to contribute even more, and I wish other countries will keep on contributing more, because as mentioned, it's not just creating FTEs, the employment. It's not just bringing innovation to all the industries, but it's actually about losing, potentially, the battle that we cannot lose.
Daniel, Adam raises a very good point there. The budget of NASA versus ESA, I imagine, is because there's been greater sort of public perception in the US that this is something to invest in. I mean, there's the Apollo missions, the sort of
the mystique around that for a whole generation of Americans. But is it also about a closer relationship between the private sector companies like Lockheed and NASA that made the government realize this is something we should invest in? Does that exist in Europe, or to a lesser extent?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I was thinking, as Adam was talking of, kind of, I think, 3 sort of legs of the stool. Military, right, so military investments in space, civilian government agencies investment in space, and industry, right? And those have to be very closely tied partnerships. And then the reality is NASA, while they have a civilian agency with a civil mission, they've always had a close link to the military, because we understand that applications in space are multi-use, and they've always had a close relationship with industry. If you actually look at the work that's performed by NASA, about 80% of what NASA does is done via industry. So it's an extremely close partnership between industry and the government. And that's what we're seeing as in Europe. And in Poland in particular, while we're talking about Poland, has really leaned forward there. Poland is understanding that investments in the civil side from the military and industry, that close tied partnership is how you really advance. I work with countries all over the world. And when you look at Australia, they're rapidly advancing in space. The United Kingdom is really starting to invest heavily in space. Poland, Central Eastern Europe, right? And I think what we're seeing is people are understanding and beginning to see the benefits. We also touched on education. That's a really important aspect. So when you talk about NASA, NASA is very closely tied with the universities across the United States. I'm a fundamental believer in that we have to invest in universities, and we have to entice and encourage young people to go into STEM-related fields. And that starts with helping them understand why space is such a great place to be and how it changes our lives. That's what we're also doing, right? So you see around the world, countries that are advancing, including Poland, are engaging universities. Because that's where it starts, right? I mean, the young people, the fields they want to go into, building up the technical applications. And the last thing, when I touch on industry, it's a combination of both large industries such as Lockheed Martin, and leveraging the innovation and flexibility of upstarts, right? So new industry coming in. And so it really is about that partnership that you're touching on. And I believe that's why you see some of the differences, and I think it's why you see Europe really start to invest heavily in that area.
Interesting. I moderated a panel here last night on FDI where one of the panelists raised the issue that in Poland there used to be 15 engineering students per 1,000. Now it's dropped to 12. So this is a downward trend. I mean, that must be a worry, right? If you're trying to build up a space industry and fewer people are going into engineering, you need these people to be skilled, right? If they're going to set up these companies. And how is that being dealt with in Poland in particular?
So this is a really big issue right now because more and more people are choosing other subjects than technical. All around the world, I think, not only in Poland. And the good news is that we have still a lot of percentage engineers in our society. Really big percent of our society is engineers, are engineers, bigger than in the United States, for example. So we have resources to utilize in space, but still we are looking for new bright minds, more and more people, because Poland right now growing tremendously, more and more people coming to from other parts of the Europe and from the world to Poland, and so it's easier to even hire in Poland Italian people or people from the US, so this is from Spain. So this is, I think, on the bright side of this equation. But from the second side, Poland should put more efforts to promote technical projects, technical studies, and I think what Slawosz is doing right now, this will be like an example for the young people to choose more technical subjects, and we'll have more engineers in the future. Right now it's going in the not good direction. The statistics are not positive for us.
It's interesting what Tenney was saying about the three legs of the stool. Sometimes I often wonder that Europe is a little squeamish about military spending, about defence, public spending, and we know this is something that we've talked about a lot since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Europe should be spending more on defence. Does the space industry have a problem that there is this pushback sometimes, and people say, well, we should be spending money on schools and hospitals and social security nets, not satellites and rockets? Things like that. I mean, is that about public perception too? Is that about getting people like Zwoliński on TV and people being like, wow, okay, space isn't just about boys spending money on big rockets, it's about developing pharmaceuticals. Are you seeing that progress made?
I mean, it's always a difficult debate to convince decision makers, politicians to invest in anything, whether it is space or schools or hospitals or whatever it is. And I'm doing this almost on a daily basis, because my job as DG is, of course, to prepare future programs, future funding. We had a ministerial conference in November 22, which was enormously successful. And let me just recall the figures just to put the financial part of it in context. I fully agree with what you said. I wish I would have the budget of NASA. This is something that is always my benchmark. We're getting a bit closer because we are on an uphill trend. But in November 22, at the last ministerial conference, we just came out of COVID, as you all know. We had double-digit inflation rates in several countries. That means the economy was not in a very happy state. We had really fear of economic downturns. My job was exactly under these boundary conditions to lobby for funds or convince decision makers that money is needed for all these space projects. I have to say, the arguments were well received. We got 17% more than the previous ministerial, which was pre-COVID, despite all the circumstances which have not been very favorable. But this also shows to me that space is recognized as a major growth sector and something that helps the society and the economies of the countries to grow and to be more resilient also against the crisis which we are all facing. Yes, it will always be a challenge, and we know the current budget situation in some countries in Europe is not a very easy one. It will always be a challenge. But on the other side, and there I really take the good examples of US as one country, but also China, India, UAE, Japan, and many others, where I see an enormous growth in the space sector, and for very good reasons. They're not doing it for the fun of it, sending some astronauts to somewhere, which of course is a very visible element, a very important one, but simply the space economy has been so deeply ingrained and integrated into daily life that it's absolutely necessary to be part of it. And you cannot just imagine a day without satellites, without space, because then everything would literally collapse. So I think people realize the importance more and more of space as an essential element of our well-being, of our living standard, of security. And yes, I think this is the strongest argument which we have to make people realize that there's growth opportunities, it assures security, it looks after climate change and many other elements that it is so important. And that's why companies like Adams are investing in it, and this is what I also would like to see more and more private money flowing into space.
I'm keen to get questions from the audience, but just while you guys think of
Brilliant ones. Obviously, I work in Brussels, and I see how there are certain aspects of policy that governments in the EU are willing to kind of share. The obvious one would be monetary policy with the euro, or border policy with Schengen, and some aspects that they're really not keen to share. Defense at the moment is sort of this constant battle to try to get companies to. We keep hearing, let's make a European Airbus, right, in defense, and everyone goes, yeah, but maybe not, because I quite like having my own capabilities. Is space in the defense category? Countries want to keep their own capabilities because they're thinking about security, or is it in the Euro monetary policy space where people want to share and learn from each other? What's your perception in terms of Europe? This is to anyone who wants to jump in. I mean, are countries willing to work with each other on space, or do they want to keep their own national capabilities?
I think it starts to change, and obviously, like we still see a lot of this is mine, this is mine, this is mine, and do not touch it. I think a good example is NATO Innovation Fund. This is coming. This is coming in a big way, and I think it's not only pool of money, which again is helpful because this is going to be a super smart investor. But I think there is one thing that it's going to change, and it's changing already. It's so-called dual-use perspective or perception. So 3 years ago, when people were hearing dual use, they heard defense. When they heard defense, they got scared and they were running away. It has changed substantially after Russian invasion in Ukraine. People start to think, okay, maybe actually we need some of this dual use. And this dual use, it's for protecting people, protecting borders, for the security. So over those last 3 years, dual use has changed completely its perception from something that people were not even willing to talk about to something which is perceived as okay, we need dual use technologies, and the dual use technologies are on the rise. So, and this is more actually collaborative because again, trying to protect, space tech for one country doesn't make any sense, obviously. Yeah? This is global tech by definition. Actually, I have a strong belief that the good tech is global. If it's not global, it's probably not good. And so this I see as a change. And also, like replying a bit to what you've mentioned about, how to convince governments, like to spend more on space tech, my answer is democratization. So space tech brings democratization. Democratization in communication, in access to data, in access to information. With satellites, we can have an internet access in the rural areas, in the areas we do not have the GSM network, but also we have an access to the space data, like Earth observation data. This is democratization of access to information globally, which stimulates openness, democracy, and so this is part of the answer. And another part of the answer is that actually you cannot protect our planet Earth without Earth observation and data coming from satellites. It's really hard to understand the processes which are happening on the Earth, on planet, from within. It's like trying, like to look behind your own eyes. Like you really need to see from top. You need to see from using optical. You need to see using SAR. You need to see using infrared and many others, like sensors to understand what's happening here in order to protect it.
Henry, just to comment, I think it's a little both. It's a little bit of both. I mean, so individual countries, if you think about military applications, have military, and they want the ability to have sovereign capabilities. At the same time, I could tell you from working with so many countries around the world, we're seeing cooperation like we've never seen before, and we think it's a really good thing. It's allied nations working together. One, we understand that global competition among industries is really good. Right, so we know that competition brings out innovation, right? So when we have, when we allow companies to compete, for example, we create innovation through that. But the other thing we're seeing is the supply chain. When we went through COVID, we saw fragility, great fragility in the global supply chain. And I think that allied nations in Europe and the United States and Australia and Japan and others are understanding that we can rely upon one another and we're stronger together. And so there's no reason we can't have a supplier out of Central Eastern Europe, for example, that's coming right back into the US market or going into the Australian market and et cetera. And by doing that, we'll advance our capabilities way beyond what we ever could alone. And so by cooperating together, we can advance quicker and we can strengthen the supply chain for all the nations that are involved. Things like the Artemis Accord, for example, are reaching across. The International Space Station has been a great bridge for countries for many years. We often used to say when I was in NASA, Joseph, that the International Space Station was the one place we could collaborate no matter what was happening around the globe. But today, I think what we're seeing is that we need allied nations to cooperate and work together. I'm seeing that change quicker than I ever had before in my career.
Is NATO playing a role in driving that? Sorry. Or is NATO sort of taking more of a backseat? They don't want to make it look too defense-focused?
Yeah, I certainly think NATO is helping us with cooperation. Right, it's opening up the door to share technologies and capabilities across. So certainly, I think the answer is yes.
So from my perspective, countries are collaborating less than more, like it was in the past. For example, Russia, China, we have like separate blocks of power emerging all around the world. More and more wars are happening in the Middle East, in Europe, and everywhere actually. So this is not a good sign. But in Europe, I think the integration is progressing, and I hope that when we will make a few steps forwards, space will be like one of the first domain what Europe will sponsor with the full amount of money, which is right now going from separate agency, and I think we as a Europe, if we will stay in Europe and Europe will survive this transformation, I think we'll have really big capabilities in terms of space and other sectors. So, yeah.
Do you agree with that? Do you see countries in Europe all working together, or could they do more?
Actually, both is happening. There is a
a stronger European cooperation, and I see it in this context. Our budget is increasing, as I mentioned before, and that's good. And we have new, really ambitious programs where Europe is showing its strength, its capabilities, and this is really great. I also see a bit the opposite, that there are some national, and this is mostly related to the security part, that the security part obviously is still a national domain. It's not yet a fully European domain, and this is at the core of this discussion. So yes, I see both, but being a true European, of course, I see as a really long-term way forward, as the only way forward for Europe to really better integrate its capabilities. There's excellent capabilities in many of these countries. And if we would just pull them more cleverly together and patching the holes that are still open and through joint investments, I think there's so much more Europe could do in terms of developing its excellence and its capability. We have shown it in many domains. Take Copernicus, Galileo, take some space science missions, Euclid, choose as examples where Europe is among the top because we are pooling excellence and expertise.
Horizon as well, right? I mean, there's Horizon. Any questions from the audience? I'd be very keen to hear from, yes, gentleman in the front row. Do we have a mic? There we go, thanks. If you could introduce yourself before you ask the question, that'd be great.
Victor Schmidt, NetGuru, based in Poland. Question for Rafał a little bit. So ISA is based headquartered in Helsinki, which is, I think, technically outside of the Three Seas region. What do you think Poland and the region as a whole can learn from Finland, and what kind of support did you get from both the government and all the different institutions and I guess the tech and space community there?
Right. So, yes, I think indeed Finland is outside of the Three Seas sort of group of countries, although it does border with Baltic quite a lot. So perhaps we should rediscuss this at a certain point. But it was somewhat of an accidental situation that ISA was born in Finland as it happened. As you know, Victor, I'm Polish. I moved there to study at the university as part of the Erasmus student exchange program, which, by the way, every single time I want to emphasize as one of the greatest achievements of the European Union, and I think it should be subsidized further and invested in furthermore. Anyway, I ended up studying there for a year, and that's where I've met my co-founder, and we did start the company at the university. And since we were there, that's when it emerged, and the headquarters resides there. It is a truly international company today. I think it's worth mentioning that we've got a huge office in Warsaw, a big one in Spain, one in the UK, one big one in the United States as well, right? So there's 700 people in ISA spread across the world. But there are a few things indeed in Finland that have helped the origination of ISA. There was an investment capability that existed over there through a public mean called Techas back in the days, which is Business Finland. And I think that's something that we should still try to sort of look into a bit more, because I haven't seen an exact sort of similar type of financing being deployed in other places. What were the unique things of it? Look, when we started, myself and Pekka, the technology itself behind the company did not exist. So somebody had to finance the R&D part of the development. And that's, as Adam probably can confirm, that's not something that VCs very easily take on themselves, right? Usually you wanna step into a startup when at least some foundation of the technology exists. And then the question is, all right, if there is a group of people that want to develop something new, and every new innovation starts with developing something new, who is really going to pay for that? And I think if you look at this sort of return analysis or return on investment analysis, it's going to always be difficult for financial investors to invest in R&D in the early stage, because how will they realize that return, right? However, on the other hand, nation states can and should take that risk, because even if the R&D itself is failed from the perspective that it doesn't reach the goal of the innovation that it was supposed to, you still have realized all this financing within your country, and you still have invested in developing the future generation of scientists and innovators, right? There are countless examples of startups or of teams that have failed at one startup, second startup, third startup. I'm sure you know this from your own experience, that the teams don't succeed the first, second, third time, right? But if they are not being given the opportunity to innovate to begin with, they will never succeed, right? So regardless of how many engineers you have coming out of the universities, 12 or 15, if you don't have an infrastructure, financial infrastructure that allows them to innovate at this early stage, there's not going to be the next stage where VCs can step in, right? Here, I will say, you know, a little bit challenging to Josef, I see ESA's role majorly over here, and I know that ESA is doing this, where, you know, today, the truth is that if there is no TechES, the next best place to go to raise this financing is European Space Agency, and I think that's a fair place, but it's not enough today, and maybe I will respond a little bit to why this is not enough in Europe in comparison to the US, is because a ton of this early stage innovative financing comes from the security domain in the US. You see Naval Research Lab, AFRL, Air Force Research Lab, right? So many, DARPA, so many investment mechanisms that are designed to support the fundamental research, which ultimately must happen somewhere, otherwise there won't be a startup, is linked to security-related domain. And I think if somebody believes that space is the only dual-use critical infrastructure, then ask yourselves, what are the railroads used for during the wartime, or the roads? Like, we are kidding ourselves. We think that the space is like, oh my God, we are going to use it for security-related items. Every single critical infrastructure is security-related, whether we like it or not.
Great answer. Yes, there's the lady in the third row, and then we'll take the gentleman in front of her. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anna Burzykowska from the European Space Agency. I have a question to Josef and to Adam. So by my rough calculation, this whole region is around, actually it's over 100 million people, European citizens. European citizens, that means the customers for satellite technology solutions, governments that are using this technology, the entrepreneurs that are growing in this region, such as Rafał, Grzegorz, they show the examples that brilliant companies can grow in this region. So the question is, it's a traditional question with a twist. So going forward, what are the low-hanging fruits for this region to develop the capability further, or to start developing the capability? And should they aim for the low-hanging fruit, or maybe a high-hanging fruit, given where the whole space technology and the whole space sector is going in this decade, including ambitious goals such as space exploration, in-orbit servicing, completely new domain that are going to be actually driving the innovation in the next 10, 15 years.
Or even the extraterrestrial fruit. Sorry, that's a crap joke. Why don't you go first?
Low-hanging fruits, I think the ones that, especially for maybe newcomers or countries that are not yet as deep in having a space capability as some of the more established ones, are certainly in the downstream sector. The downstream sector is actually where most of the economy growth is happening. 90% roughly of the total space economy of these 460 billion I mentioned before is in the downstream sector. And I think countries in the 3Cs region, they are very capable with good IT capabilities, good access to agriculture, forestry, and other domains to really utilize these data quite quickly, almost overnight, for developing services for the various applications. And I think that's an immediate start that can really happen now. And then, of course, gradually build up more hardware capability, satellites. I mean, what Rafał was doing is enormous, but and I wish I could see more and more of this happening, but I think the quick start is really downstream and then moving upstream.
I would say that the region is super highly populated with technical skilled people. If you look at all the statistics, and I've seen Miran at some point here from Cosmosi, who can probably gave us numbers on that one. This region is actually particularly strong in technical skills rather than liberal arts or anything else, and we see this. So I would say that, especially even if we include Ukraine. And if we look at that, Ukraine used to be the power hub for the whole ex-Soviet Union for the space tech. So the number of space tech engineers there, the the know-how that they have, actually right now partially in Ukraine, partially in other European countries like Italy and many others. The talent is here, so there is a strong fundament to build upon throughout the region, and this is true for Baltics and Balkans and everyone in between. Having said that, I'm a strong believer that you don't really go into the areas which are already populated with a lot of companies, and we as VC, like 2 or 3 years ago, we've seen probably, I don't know, like a dozen decks on rocket launchers, and we said no, pass. It's gonna be a bloodbath. It's unsustainable. Of course, as an investor, you wish to invest in a rocket launcher because it's like the most sexy thing you can think of. Yeah, it's like owning. In the past, 20 or 30 years ago, each and every P wanted to have a TV station in their, portfolio. Like today, if you are in space, you want to have a rocket launcher. And we've looked at all those investment and said, no, it's like it's probably a bit too late to compete in this space. So let's think of what we can do right now, which is going to be ahead of the curve. As it was already mentioned, like in space infrastructure, this is something which is going to be huge, which is going to be growing. And if you start right now, you better start in the area which is going to be big in 3, 5, 10 years time, rather than that the race is already on and hundreds or billions of money is being pumped up.
You just crushed the dreams of all the people in the audience that wanted to pitch their rocket launcher idea to you. Just finally, we have time for one very quick question here. The gentleman who's been waiting very patiently.
Adam, maybe if you can just talk a little bit about recent lunar missions and the varying degrees of success. And do investors understand the risk of space? And is that going to have a chilling effect on investment in space? Or do you think they understand and accept that risk?
It's a great question.
It's a very good question because, it's exciting, but it's tricky, So if we invest right now in younger companies, we of course, have this privilege of seeing how ISI has developed over the years and, how bumpy can be this road. And when, for instance, when we are talking to some of the portfolio companies, they want to send a satellite, we are telling them, you need to fundraise to send 2. Because, probability that one of them is going to fail is actually quite high. And then it's a really uncomfortable situation to be in fundraising once your first satellite is a failure. So you better fundraise to launch 2 of them, and then of course the probability that at least one of them is going to work, it's substantially higher. And then once you can prove that your satellite is working, you establish communication and things like that, then fundraising gets obviously much easier, because up until you've got an asset in space that you can communicate with, everyone is saying, it's like, okay, like you can prove something in laboratory, but show me this in space. But the good thing is there are more and more investors investing in space, and we are actually taking the lead of bringing more and more of them, meaning bringing more of venture capital funds that used to invest in e-commerces, marketplaces, and things like this, to try and put, like a few millions in some of those space tech companies to start to learn to get on this road, to get on this trip, to embark. And probably in a few years, maybe 2, 3, 5 years down the road, I'm positive we're going to have much more VCs and private investors investing in space.
That's a great way to end. Thank you so much for all of your comments. I learned a huge amount this morning, and a great way to start the day. I wanted to say first thank you to the Atlantic Council, to BGK, and to all the team at the 3Cs Hub for organising this. But most importantly, thank you so much to the panelists, Josef, Rafał, Adam, Daniel, and Grzegorz. It was great. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. Take care.